In this video, we're going to be talking about the basics in creating elements in MicroStation. But before we get started to any given tool, there's a concept in MicroStation. It's called 1, 2, 3. That's how simple it is. Step 1 is you choose the tool that you want to be in. So for example, if I came up to Place Smartline and I clicked on that, that was step 1, choose the tool. Step 2 is look at the tool settings window. Mine's located in the upper right corner. It will tell me the name of the tool I'm in and give me the settings for the tool that I'm in. You want to check to make sure those settings are what you want. This is the biggest problem new users have, is they think the settings are set the way they should be. They begin to work and then they don't see what they want and they're confused. They didn't look at the tool settings window. Step 3 is read the status bar, the prompt. In the bottom left corner, you'll see the name of the tool you're in, a greater than symbol, and you'll see a prompt of what to do next. 1, pick the tool. 2, look at your tool settings window. 3, read the status bar. Over time, you won't need to do these things because you'll just know where you are intuitively. So the first tool we're going to look at here, after we got through our 1, 2, 3, we're going to look at the Place Smartline. Now on the tool settings window, you can see I have segment type options. I've got lines and I have arcs. I'm going to leave it set to lines. We have vertex, we have sharp, we have rounded, and we have chamfered. I'm going to leave that set to sharp. We have the option to join the elements together. As I create these segments, I can join them together, and that's generally what we want to do. The next one is to rotate the AccuDraw compass with each segment, which is generally a good thing, and then start in line mode. That means that if I exit this tool, go to another tool, and I come back, it will jump back to segment type of line. So we're going to start off by doing a data, and I'm just going to move my cursor up, do another data. Now at this point, I can change my segment type from lines to arcs. So if I change this to arcs, I'm now being prompted to define the center of my arc. So I'm going to move my cursor out perpendicular. The AccuDraw compass makes that simple. I'm going to do a data, and then I can define the sweep angle of my arc. I'm going to move it around, let's say clockwise, and I'm just going to go an arbitrary angle. I'm going to do another data. Now it remains in the arc mode. I want to switch it back to lines. So I can do this by using an AccuDraw keyboard shortcut. It is the tilde key. That will toggle the setting. So if I look at my tool settings window and I hit tilde again, you can see it jumps from arcs to line each time I hit tilde. So I'm back to line, and as I move my cursor off the arc, notice that I'm perfectly tangent to that arc. So I'll do another data, and then I'll complete this by doing a reset. So that's using segment type line and arcs. Going to do an undo, Control Z. We're now going to look at the vertex type. First option is sharp, and then rounded, and then chamfered. So it's set to sharp. We're going to go ahead and start a line. Let's say we're going to start a line right out here. We're going to do a data. And we're going to be using AccuDraw, and we want to draw a line that is perpendicular to this line. So you'll notice our compass is there. So we're going to rotate the compass to be parallel to that line. We're going to do RE, that suspends my command. I pick the line who I want to be parallel to. I data. Now my compass is rotated to be parallel or perpendicular. Now I'm going to move my cursor out. Let's say I'm going to go out, let's say 6 feet. I type in 6, I do a data, the compass shows up. We're going to go out to the right again, and we're going to be using the perpendicular tick mark, again, talked about in the prior videos. I'm going to do a second data. That last corner was a sharp corner. We're going to change from vertex sharp to rounded, and we're going to change our rounded radius to 2. And then I'm going to move my cursor out, and I'm going to be repeating that value of 6. You'll notice that back at the AccuDraw compass, the corner's not sharp, it's rounded. So I'm going to do another data. Now I have a sharp corner, a rounded corner, and we're going to finish off by doing a chamfered corner. And you'll notice it carries the rounded radius value over. So I'm going to move my cursor again off to repeating that value of 6 with a perpendicular tick mark. And then I'm going to complete it with a reset. So we've got a sharp corner, we have a rounded corner, and we have a chamfered corner. This is just a segment. Now this is actually an arc, and you'll notice it says it's a complex chain / arc because this is one element. It's a complex chain because I had join elements checked. So I'm going to go ahead and do an undo. So we're going to set this back to sharp, and now we're going to look at the Place Line tool. It's up on our placement group. Click on Place Line. Now Place Line isn't as clever as Place Smartline. On the tool settings window, you notice I have two options, length and angle. This tool does not join elements together. It creates separate segments. It does not let me put an arc in there. It doesn't let me round off the corners or put chamfers in. But it does allow me to set the length and the angle, so I can set this and say, let's say it's going to be 12 feet. And for my angle, let's say that's going to be north 45 east. I hit enter. Now I'm constrained. I have this line that is a length of 12 and it's at an angle of 45 degrees northeast. So that's place line, and then I can just place the line where I want to. You notice that when I go to place another one, it's relative to the compass, so the angle now is different. It's relative to the compass's origin. So I'm going to hit reset, and we're going to do an undo. Next thing we're going to talk about is arcs. And we're going to come up here, and we're going to go to the Place Arc. It's under the Arc Tools. I'm going to select Place Arc. On the Tool Settings window, you're going to notice the methods. Again, step 2 is look at the Tool Settings window. Make sure the method is set to what you want it to do. The first option is Start Center. Start means pick a point on the arc and then pick the center. The next one means pick the center and then a point on the edge of the arc. And then the last two are Start Mid End and then Start End Mid. We're going to be doing Start Center. Now at any point, if you know the values, the radius, length, start angle, sweep angle, you can check these boxes and enter those values. I'm going to be doing it graphically based on elements on the screen. So I'm going to zoom in a bit here. Let's say I wanted to place an arc along the outside of this segment of sidewalk. So I'm going to start here, not the center, but the edge, do a data. Now as I move my cursor out, you can see it's looking for me to define the center. So I'm going to go to the center point of the segment. I'm going to do another data. And then it's looking for me to define my sweep angle. I can go clockwise or counterclockwise. And I'm going to bring it back around like this and do another data. And there's my arc. So that's a quick way for you to put in your arcs. So I'm going to go ahead and do an undo. That's Control Z. The next thing we're going to look at is Place Block. So we're going to come up here to the Place Block tool. On the Tool Settings window, you're going to see there's two methods. There's orthogonal and there's rotated. We're going to be taking a look at orthogonal first. And on the Tool Settings window, you're going to notice there's a couple of other options, area, fill type, and fill color. For area, you're going to want to leave it set to solid. There's a long explanation, but this has to do with patterning. Just leave it set to solid. For fill type, we have three choices. We have none, meaning don't fill it in, opaque, fill it in, and we'll look at the fill color in a moment, or outline, fill it in with one color and outline the object with a different color. So we're going to choose none to start off with, and we're going to be doing orthogonal, and we're just going to draw a rectangle in, doing a left corner and then the opposite corner, and there's our shape. As I hover over it, you can see it's a shape element. It's a closed element in MicroStation. So we're going to do fill type of opaque next. Now when I go to this, you'll see fill color becomes enabled. This is the same as your active color on your attributes toolbar. So if I was to change the fill color here, it would change it on my attributes group. So I'm going to leave it set to just number 8. I'm going to draw in another shape, and you can see this one's filled in. You're seeing the fill because there's a view attribute called fill, and that's turned on. It's a design file setting. So if I come up to my view attributes, which is on the header of the view border, first icon, on the view attributes, second column, number 2 is fill, and you can see this is turned on. If I turn it off, you'll notice that it turns it off. That doesn't mean that it's gone, it just means it's filtering that out. If I turn it back on, you can see it's on. So we're going to go ahead and close view attributes. Now the other option there is outlined, and this is where I can have the outline of the object be one color and the fill be a different. So I'm going to choose outlined. You notice the fill color, it's set to 2, but if I look at my attributes and you can see the color there, it's set to 8. So my outside color will be 8 and my inside color fill will be 2. Now I'm going to change the weight so that we can clearly see the outline color. I'm going to change my weight to, let's say, 10. It's going to be very obvious. I'm going to place another shape in, and now you can see the inside is green, color 2, and the outline is color 8. And again, I made it a weight of 10, which is not a standard, just helps to illustrate this. So I'm going to do an undo. So on the tool settings window, you're going to notice the fill type there. If we go to any other tool that allows us to place a closed element, like place circle, place block, which we're in, or place ellipse, any tool that supports filling in an object, which is a closed element, you'll see that it'll be set to, in this case, outlined. If I change it to none, if I go to other tools, they all share the same settings. So I'm going to change this back to none. We're going to look at another method on the tool settings window for place block, which is rotated. So we're going to leave this set to fill type of none. We're going to be placing in, let's say, another slab here of concrete moving out this way. And we want this to be a shape. I don't want to have to draw it in using lines. I'm going to be just using a place block tool. So I'm going to start at this corner. I'm going to do a data, left click. What it's asking me to do is two things. One, define the angle, the rotated, that's the rotated part, and the length of one of the sides. So if I move my cursor here and do my second data, you're going to see that one side is defined. Now I'm defining the other side. And now I can move my cursor out, again using AccuDraw, and we'll just make that 10, and I'll do a data, and now I've defined that slab of concrete. So I'm going to do an undo. So that's the method of rotated. Now this is a setting, if I do a save settings in MicroStation, then the next person who opens this file up, their method will be set to rotated. That's why step number 2 is make sure the settings on the tool settings window are what you want. Don't assume that it's set to orthogonal and that's what you're expecting. If it was rotated, you're going to be a little confused. So again, check the tool settings window. Now the next tool we're going to look at is place circle. So we're going to come up here to our place circle tool. And the method on this, we have 3 choices. We have center, we have edge, and we have diameter. We're going to be looking at center first. Now we do have, again, the option for fill type. Again, if I would have left it set to outlined, it would have carried over to this tool. And at the bottom, we have a choice. We can predefine the diameter of the circle and or the radius of the circle. We would just choose the one, and we would check it. We'd enter the value. We're going to be doing this graphically. So with the set to center method, it's looking for us to pick the center of the circle. So I'm just going to pick this point here on the side of the sidewalk, do a data, and then as I move my cursor out, I'm defining the radius of the circle. So I'm going to do a second data, and there it is. So let's do an undo, and we're going to look at the other method, which is diameter. And this is where I would pick one edge of the circle. I'm going to go to the side of this sidewalk, data, and I'm going to move my cursor out, and I'm going to pick the second edge, data. So now I have a circle between those 2 points. So this is not a perfectly square slab. So we're going to do a undo. Now the next thing we're going to look at on the circles tab there, you're going to see there's an option for place ellipse. Tool settings window, again, step 2. We have 3 different methods. We have center, we have by edge, we have ends. Edge and ends are very similar in how they work, but center, again, I'm placing an ellipse. It's going to ask me to pick the center of the ellipse. Now, if you know what the primary and secondary radiuses are, you can check the boxes and input them. And if you know the rotation, you can check that and put that in. I'm going to be defining those graphically. So I'm going to move my cursor to this point here, and I'm going to say that's the center of my ellipse. I'm going to do a data. And now as I move my cursor out, you can see there's like a dotted line dragging out. It's looking for, in this case, one point on the ellipse, whether that's primary or secondary, major or minor, if you will. I'm going to move my cursor up here. I'm defining the radius of one side of the ellipse and the angle. So I'm going to do a second data there. And then as I drag my cursor out, you can see I'm defining the secondary radius value as move it out. If I move it to this point here, I can do a data, and you can see I've placed an arc there. Again, if you would have known the values for primary, secondary, and radius, you could have checked the boxes and entered them in. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Up here on placement, we have another tool. It's B-Spline, and we're going to look at B-Spline by points. Here at Caltrans, you should be drawing using lines and arcs because that can be constructed or staked in the field. B-Spline's way more difficult to do that in the field. So this should be used for doing natural features like rivers, creeks, things like that. So I'm going to choose B-Spline by points. On the tool settings window, I have 5 different methods. We're going to be looking at the first 2. Control point. I'm going to start my B-Spline, but for you to clearly see this, I'm going to change my color from color 8 to color 0. Just makes it easier for you to see. Now, when I have it set to control points, there's a lot of interpolation that happens, and I have to do at least 3 data points to graphically see the B-Spline appear. So I'm going to do a data. Looks like a dotted line, but I'm going to do a second data. Still not 3, can't see the graphics. Third data, there's my B-Spline. Now you notice that the B-Spline is not intersecting the data points that I did. This is where the interpolation comes. So if you want to control this, you would use the second method. So I'm going to do a final data and then a reset. We're going to look at the second method, through points. And you can create an open or a closed B-Spline. In this case, we're doing open. This one, as soon as I do my second data point, we'll see the B-Spline. I'm going to do a second data point. You can now see the B-Spline. And when I do my third data, you can see the B-Spline is intersecting the data points. So this gives you a bit more control than the control points option. So as I do more datas, you can see those dots. Those are my data points. I do a reset, and there's my B-Spline. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of undos to get rid of those. Now the next thing we're going to look at is creating a complex chain. So what we're going to look at here is on our groups up in the top, there's a tool. It's called Create Complex Chain. So I'm going to select that. On the tool settings window, we have 2 different methods, automatic and manual. Manual is where you would have to pick or do a data on each individual segment you want to join. Automatic is you pick the first segment and then it will try to automatically find the rest of them and create, in this case, a complex chain. Now, a complex chain is an open element in MicroStation. For this example, we're going to do a fit view because we're going to be chaining together a ramp alignment. So I'm going to shift, right click, choose fit view. Then I'm going to hit reset and I go right back to my create complex chain. Now the red elements that you see here, that's my ramp alignment. And if I hover my cursor over any one of those elements, in this case you see that it's just an arc. These aren't all one element in MicroStation. You'll run into this occasionally where elements that you would think would be a complex chain are not. They're individual elements, and you need to chain them together. You'll notice that there's a little segment popping off here. Now, I added this in intentionally because this is going to demonstrate the fork in the road concept. Now, I have it set to method of automatic. The maximum gap, this is any gaps that it finds. How big a gap do you want it to just jump and connect? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to select this element right here. I'm going to zoom out just a bit more so you can see this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the first segment in my chain. So as I move my cursor over this arc, I'm going to do a data. Because I have it set to automatic, I move my cursor off. I do a second data to accept that. You'll then see it highlights, and then it gets up to a certain point right down here. Now you notice it chose to go down that line. Well, that's my fork in the road. And if I look at my status bar in the bottom left, you'll notice it says fork, all in capital letters. It says accept or reset to see alternate. What it's giving me is a choice to accept that as the direction I want to go. And I would do that with a data, a left click. If that's not the way I want to go, I would hit reset, which is the right button, and it would cycle through to the next possible choice. So when I hit the reset on my mouse, the right button, watch the color change. You notice that it unhighlights that segment and it goes to the other element, which happens to be an arc. Now I need to accept it to say that is the path I want you to go. So I do another data, accepting that. It now has highlighted everything that I want. I would do an additional data, left click, to accept it. Now, one thing you may notice, see the attributes? They weren't the same as the ramp alignment. This tool creates an element, and what determines the attributes of an element you create? Your active settings. So what I'm going to do this correctly is I'm going to do an undo. I'm going to match the attributes of the ramp alignment by doing an Alt Data. Now, if I look at my attributes in the top left, it now matches the attributes of that so that the element I create will be correct. Now, that can be good or bad. If you're trying to chain these all together, I don't want to change the attributes. I want to keep them the same. So I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to pick the first segment, move my cursor off, data, it finds that fork in the road, I hit reset, data to accept the new direction, finds the end, I do a second data, it's complete. Now, if I hover my cursor over this segment, you're going to notice that it highlights just the arc. Now, but it tells me that it's a complex chain / an arc within the complex chain. So people get confused. They think as they hover their cursor back over the element, it only highlights a segment. That's what this tool does. It looks at segments. It doesn't look at the entire element. If I was to go to a different tool, like let's say copy, if I come up to my copy element tool, and I move my cursor over this element, you'll see that the entire element highlights because it sees it as one element. The create complex chain says I see it as segments. So that's why you're only seeing it highlight parts. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the create complex shape. That's the icon right below that. It also has two methods, manual and automatic. We're going to be doing automatic. We're going to zoom into this area right down here. You'll notice that this is a complex shape right here, that even though it's highlighting part of it, if I move my cursor over this element, it's just a line. We want to make this area one shape. So on the tool settings window, got it set to automatic. In this case, we're joining arcs with lines, so simplified geometry won't matter. We're going to pick a start point, just like we did with the alignment, but we remembered we should match the attributes first. So we're going to do an Alt Data, matching the attributes right in the middle of the command. Now I'm going to accept that. You're going to see it goes off and it's going to pick a path. And I'll zoom out. You can see that's not the way I want to go. I'm going to hit reset. You'll see it chooses another path, not again the way I want to go. Reset. Now it's going the way I want. I'll do a data, and then you'll see it goes around. It finds a next segments. I'll do another data. It's not going the right way. I'll hit reset, and then reset again, and I'll see it finds my direction. I'll do a data to accept that it's created. Now, if I hover over it, you're going to notice that again, it says it's a complex shape, and I'm hovering over the arc of that complex shape. So this create complex shape is a great tool. Now, there's another way to go about doing this, and this is the create region tool. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do an undo. And as I hover over this element, you can see that's back to just being a line in MicroStation. So I did an undo, Control Z, so I undid the creating of the complex shape. The next tool we're going to look at, and the final tool, is going to be Create Region. So I'm going to select this tool. On the Tool Settings window, our methods are displayed as icons. Now, the most common method people use is flood. The second one is union, where if you have two crossing elements, shapes, you can union them together. You can see the intersection or you can see the difference between elements. So the most common one people do is flood. Now there's a couple of other options. Again, we have fill type. Again, we're going to change this to opaque, and we're going to change our fill type. We're going to make it color 2 so we can see it clearly. Now we have an option to keep the original elements that we use because we're going to be creating a new shape based on existing elements. So in this case, we're going to tell it to not keep the original elements, and we're going to be using the flood method, and we're going to move our cursor into this area, and we're going to do a data. Now you'll see a preview, a highlight of what it's capturing and what it's going to create. So I'm going to do another data to accept that, and then you can see the new shape is filled in. So that's a very quick way for me to create a shape based on elements that I was going to chain together. So now there are pros and cons to both. You figure out which tool is best for which situation. In the previous example, we did not turn on Keep Original because we wanted to get rid of the elements that were being used to create the shape. In this case, we're going to keep the original, and associative region boundary becomes enabled. We're also going to turn on opaque, and we're going to change our fill color to color 1 so we could see this. Now I've got an example a little further down here. This is an area that I want to create a flooded filled shape in. I'm going to data, it'll find the region, I'll data to accept. Now I've got an associative region, and if I use my element selection tool and I hover over it, you can see it says associative region. It's not a shape, it's an associative region. It's associated to the elements that were used to create it. So as an example, if I went to the Move Element tool and I was to move one of these lines used to define the boundary, as I move it out, you can see it redefines the associative region. So it's associated to the element. And if I use the Modify Element tool and I modify the angle, you can see it will adjust the region. So that's something that can be really powerful, and this would work across a reference file, meaning if these elements were in a reference file, it would still work, the associative region boundary. So hopefully that gives you some basics in getting started in creating elements. And don't forget, 1, 2, 3. Pick the tool, look at your tool settings window, read the status bar in the bottom left corner. See you in the next video.